With the Phoenix Suns firing their head coach following a disappointing season, we're going to take a look at the case for the Pelicans doing the same thing with head coach Willie Green in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. It's a head coaching focused episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with you on this Friday, and we are going to take a look at head coach Willie Green. On this episode, we're going to make the case for why the New Orleans Pelicans should make a change with Willie Green at the head coaching position, especially given what the Suns did. And I'm going to tell you how it ties into something that David Griffin said. And I'm going to have an important asterisk in the beginning of all of this, too. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join almost 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube. That would be a cool milestone to reach. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday. And if you are, let me know in the comments down below. And I appreciate you tuning in every day. We got a show for you. So let's not bury the lead. Let's get into it with head coach Willie Green here. The Phoenix Suns firing Frank Vogel, their head coach, after 1 year, getting swept in the first round. So on this episode, we're going to make the case for why the Pelicans should make a change at head coach right now, especially when you look at some of the comments David Griffin said. And the Pelicans have many reasons, and we're just going to kind of go by the facts here, right? This is not based on feelings. This is not based on emotions. This doesn't really have anything to do with my opinion on it. These are just kind of the facts here. So we're not going to call Willie Green any names. We're not going to swear at him or about him. We don't need to make things up to make the case for why the Pelicans should go a different direction at head coach. And let me be clear on this too. I'm not saying they should fire him or not. There are many reasons not to, which I want to look at in the third segment, including some things you're probably not thinking about. So more on that a little bit later. But I want to circle back to something that, if you're an everydayer, you've heard me say on this show the past 2 weeks, and you heard David Griffin say it at his end of season availability too. And it comes down to this. This team needs to get better. They need to improve. Simple as that. Other teams in the West are going to try and get better. So if you are doing nothing, if you're just standing pat, that's the same as regression. You will not be in the same place next season. You will be worse because other teams are trying to get better. And that leads us to this. The Phoenix Suns fired Frank Vogel, their head coach, after 1 year. Now, there is somewhat of a scapegoatiness to that move. Their roster is flawed, but there are a lot of parallels with the Pelicans. The Suns kind of lacked an identity on offense. And while I think a lot of that talk is overrated, do me a favor, tell me, what's the Celtics offense? What's their offensive identity? Same for the Nuggets, the Timberwolves, the Thunder, right? There was definitely a lack of cohesion there, and that's, in my opinion, a lot to do with the head coach. Maybe they just weren't listening to whatever the reason was. The Suns were also swept in the first round. They underachieved. They barely got in as the 6th seed, and then we were kind of fighting with the Pelicans at the end of the regular season for that. They had higher hopes than that going into the year. There's parallels between them and the New Orleans Pelicans right now. You know, with Willie Green, we saw mistakes, issues, problems, stubbornness. We've also seen the same issues with Willie Green come up again and again, season upon season, not playing the young players, sticking with the guys that he just likes. Hawkins couldn't have played in that Thunder series. I really don't think he could have. But the reason is because the coach, Willie Green, didn't play him for him to be ready in that postseason, right? That's a big part of the problem. Willie Green at the end of his season said, we tried him, but he wasn't really ready to go in that. Well, yeah, you didn't play him, right? It's literally the guy in the hot dog suit meme being like, we're all trying to find the guy who did this, right? And it's like, it's you. That's the reason why Jordan Hawkins wasn't ready to go. We've seen the over-reliance on the defensive side of the ball and not leaning into offense, a lack of creativity there and finding things that just kind of work. And frankly, at times, and we talked about this in a show this week or last week, just almost coaching malpractice, putting Zion Williamson in the corner, Jonas Valanciunas in the corner when they're not corner three-point shooters. Part of that's lack of guys on the roster and talent and the ability to kind of use people, but that's certainly not the way to use Zion Williamson. We can all tell you that much. And so kind of the lack of the tactics there. There's also, not winning a game when you were trailing entering the fourth quarter. Not one single fourth quarter comeback this season. All of the blown double-digit leads that they had. None of that is particularly great for New Orleans, right? Look at the Thunder, by the way. They have Cason Wallace, who's a rookie, drafted in the same draft class as Jordan Hawkins, albeit higher. He played in 82 games he played in all 82 games. That's kind of incredible for the Thunder this season. He's playing very good minutes, different player than Jordan Hawkins, playing very good minutes in the postseason. By comparison, Hawkins played in 67 games, right? That extra time can really matter. And Wallace was getting, almost over 20 minutes per game, whereas Hawkins was getting 3-4 minutes sometimes. Right? Like developing those guys is an important thing. And more on that a little bit in the next segment too, because there's some long-term planning with that as well. I also want to get into this in the third segment because you'd almost claim in a way that this isn't a bad thing that they're doing with that too, because there's some kind of proven results out there. So there are things that we see with this that are a problem. Simple as that, right? Going with Larry Nance Jr. to start the second half instead of Jonas Valanciunas didn't work. Remember last year when they just took Trey Murphy out of the starting lineup for no reason really for 3 games post All-Star break, and what that did, and the Pelicans immediately went 0-3. Sometimes it feels like there's a lack of a plan there. And that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing at all. Right? I think the offensive philosophy stuff is overrated. Most teams don't have a head coach calling plays every time they go down the court. That's it's not football. That's not how it goes. You have principles in place and you hope the players stick with that. And as we've talked about here, the players often didn't. Is that on Willie Green? Is that on the players? But this comes to one of the things with it, right? Like if guys aren't doing what they should be doing, there needs to be better accountability for them. There needs to be a benching. Losing minutes, right? Playing someone else, and you don't see that. There doesn't seem to be rhyme or reason a lot of the time, other than that guy doesn't play defense, for why guys are getting minutes over another one necessarily. That's held this team back. The lack of scoring has held this team back, and that seems to be how head coach Willie Green wants to play. That's not an ideal situation. And so if you're not going to try and get better, you're going to be worse next season. You're taking a step back. It goes to what David Griffin said. That alone is a reason to go and get another head coach. Another part of this is opportunity cost. Opportunity cost, and it has to do with a recent hiring in the NBA. I want to get into that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about PrizePicks because PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. And it's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You pick more or less on 2 or more players' stat projection, and then you watch the winnings roll in. So get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks as you and the world's best players take the game to a whole new level during basketball's postseason. And now you can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball, hockey, baseball picks over on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. So they have everything that you really want to get in on. You can even go on, pick Caitlin Clark in the WNBA for all of this. So PrizePicks is really simple to play. You can make your picks in moments and get paid out in seconds. And that makes PrizePicks the #1 fantasy sports app. So download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that is a first deposit match up to $100 when you download the PrizePicks app and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is also brought to you by eBay Motors. I'm going to be driving my old Corvette this weekend, and I'm driving it thanks to eBay Motors. The formula for winning a championship, it's also what keeps your car alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Whether you want it to go faster, sound louder, have more utility, eBay Motors has you covered with the parts that you need. And that's where I get all of my parts from for all my vehicles that I work on, because with over 122 million parts for your ride, you're always going to find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your vehicle every time or your money back. I shop there because the prices are good too, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and keep bringing home huge wins. So keep your vehicle alive over at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. And today we are looking at head coach Willie Green. The reasons why, the case why the Pelicans should make a move and bring in someone different. And again, we're not going to make things up. We're not going to yell here. There's just reasons why they should. You don't need to, invent things for it, right? And let me be clear on this. I don't see the Pelicans making any move. I don't think they're going to make a change. And more on why they shouldn't in the next segment, including a couple of reasons that you probably didn't think about, even if you're one of the people that wants them to make a change at the head coach position. There's a real big one that's really important. So more on that coming up in a little bit. One of the reasons, though, that you want to look at maybe making a move is opportunity cost. And this is something that's particularly important, I think, for small market teams. One of the questions that comes up whenever you kind of talk coaching changes, there's going to probably be people in the comments saying this, and it's totally okay, is, well, who are you going to hire? Are you going to get someone better? Who are you going to get? You can't say you want to fire a head coach without coming up with another name that's going to be better than head coach Willie Green here. And no, we can just say we don't want this guy. We want someone else, and there's definite reasons why. So one of the reasons is opportunity cost, right? It's not our job to necessarily identify that the next head coach. That's on the Pelicans and, the search company that they would hire for all of this. What I can say is there are definite upgrades over Willie Green. There absolutely are. Now, Willie Green is not one of the worst head coaches in the league at all. I think there's 5 guys that actively help you win, 5 guys that actively hold you back, and then 20 guys in the middle. And I truthfully think Willie Green is one of those guys in the middle. And coaches can grow and improve and change too. You can go from being just a neutral guy to being one that really helps you. Again, as we talked about with the offensive philosophies, most coaches aren't calling plays. They instill some general concepts and things that you want to do. And then the players go out and kind of freestyle a lot of it in the moment. You can't call plays every time down the court. That just doesn't work in the NBA. One of the things that people don't realize enough, right, is where the coaches are most active is probably going to be on the defensive side of the ball sometimes. And one of the things to look at for next season, or even look in the playoffs, look at which way a team starts. The way a team kind of gets to choose which way you want to go. And so the coaches make a decision of, do you want to be talking to your team on offense or defense in the fourth quarter? When do you want to be communicating with them, right? When they're trying to, when your team's trying to score on the basket that's by your side of the bench, you can talk to your players on offense. Or do you want to kind of be yelling instructions on defense? When they're on the other side of the court, you can't really get to them as much, right? Think about that when you're watching a game next time and how that influences things. It's the type of analysis you get here on the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So normally coaches want to be talking on defense to their players in the fourth quarter late in games, on defense rather than offense, because they trust them on offense based on what they're doing. Now, the Pelicans are lacking some of those principles. They're lacking kind of like what makes us us. That's a bit of an identity, but we've also seen that the players don't do that. That's not necessarily on Willie Green, minus the accountability side of everything, right? So he's in the middle. Maybe he gets better, maybe not. But here's the thing I think you can say is if you don't have one of those 5 guys, particularly as a small market where you're trying to kind of get any sort of competitive advantage, shouldn't you be trying to go and get one of those 5 guys or finding the next one of those 5 guys, of those best coaches in the league? If you don't have one, you're not going to be as good as those 5 teams just based on that alone. That's something that's going to prevent you from being in that conversation. So do you need to go and get one of those guys or kind of identify the next one? There's something to be said for that. That's kind of opportunity cost here. What are you not doing by maintaining the status quo? And as we've seen in the West, well, if you're just not doing anything, then you are not improving, right? This is why the Phoenix Suns fired their head coach. They're not going to turn the roster over. They can't, right? We're going to talk more about this next week and what it means for the future of Devin Booker, Kevin Durant. But you have to figure these guys aren't going to get moved now. It's like what we've talked about here of what's the order of operations for the Pelicans. It's get a new center, maybe tweak your starting lineup second, then maybe fire your head coach or trade Brandon Ingram or Zion Williamson or CJ, right? There's steps you take before you get to some of those bigger ones. The first one for the Pelicans is a center position. The Phoenix Suns can't do something like that. So their first move is firing the head coach just to kind of create some change. Then maybe it'll be trading one of their big 3 guys. That's kind of the way you go about this. For the Pelicans, one of the first steps seems to be the center position, but the next one might be head coach, right? So what are you leaving on the table by not going out and trying to get the next, a better head coach and seeing if that can improve you? If the goal is to always be better and compete for a championship, in David Griffin's words, it's time, we've got to get better. It's time to get better. If there's a head coach you think is better than Willie Green, you should be going out and trying to get him, right? More on the reasons why they won't or shouldn't coming up in the next segment here. But there's opportunity costs with this. You know, if there's a guy you like or think could be a good head coach, he may get hired elsewhere. And in fact, you just saw this happen. The Charlotte Hornets hired Charles Lee as their new head coach. Charles Lee was more or less the runner-up to Willie Green during their coaching search after Stan Van Gundy. Right? That was the guy they immediately kind of identified as the number 1, and Willie Green came into the process a little bit later. He just got hired. If you think he's now better than Willie Green or could be better, you don't have the opportunity to go and get that guy anymore. And now that the Phoenix Suns are kind of in this, the Lakers still have an open head coaching job. So do the Washington Wizards, potentially the Portland Trailblazers too. If this is what it's going to take, you've got to go and make that move now because you can't fall behind in this coaching search if that's the move you want to make. And the fact that the Pelicans haven't made a move now kind of leads me to believe that they won't. We know they're not going to, right? We're just kind of explaining the reasons for why. And then we'll explain the reasons why they shouldn't coming up next. The other reason is, look, it can get worse. You can get worse than Willie Green. Think about going from Alvin Gentry to Stan Van Gundy. That didn't work out. That was a disaster of a year for New Orleans. Disaster of a year for New Orleans. And that's definitely not going to be what you want to see, with this team and everything like that. That was just a horrible head coaching decision there. And the Pelicans moved on from him after 1 year, rightly, because that just didn't work out. So I don't think Willie Green's one of the worst head coaches in the league. He's not, right? Like, I can tell you that as a fact. You might hire one. I thought Wes Unseld Jr. with the Wizards was going to be great. Turns out, no, he didn't really last. They moved on from him in the middle of the season. It can get worse. It absolutely can get worse. Think about Zion Williamson, more on this part in the next segment, calling Stan Van Gundy Coach Gundy. Like, not even kind of knowing his full name. That's insane to me. It's an absolutely insane thing to me when it comes to that. That's kind of wild, right? It can get worse. This team had 49 wins last season. Let's not lose sight of that. But if you think that coach exists out there, yeah, you should probably try and go and get him. But I don't think they don't have faith in Willie Green, because when you look at his tenure here, his resume here with New Orleans, it's not as bad as people want to make it out to be. There are flaws. Yes, absolutely. I don't think Willie Green's one of those top 5 guys. I don't even think he's in the top 10, to be perfectly honest with you. But it's not as bad as people want to make it out, especially when you kind of like look at his tenure and his record here and kind of what that says and what they're doing. So let's look at that, the good, the positive aspects of Willie Green. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is also brought to you by Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Technical foul, Jake. You've already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in this game that I'm going to keep talking about Monopoly Go. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. And there's a New Orleans themed board on there. I've been playing it. Trust me, right? I like the New Orleans Knights boards. That was the one I really was trying to get to build it up, make it look awesome. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Cool new playing pieces to travel the board with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. And stickers that you can trade to complete albums for even bigger prizes. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. And a ton include their own unique mini games. So there's always just different ways to play, different things to be doing, which keeps it feeling fresh every single day. There's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent, frenzies. So there's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench, go download it now for free on the Google Play or the App Store, and go play Monopoly Go. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join almost 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube. We'll do something exciting and fun, maybe a little bit of a celebration when we hit that number. Just Pelicans too, like nothing else. That's all just y'all having your passion out, and it just brings me so much joy to be able to host this show for you. And I truly feel honored that I get to host this show. So for your second listen today, by the way, get off of watching Fox Sports, ESPN. They don't talk sports, right? It's just hot takes all day, and you don't want that. You're going to have to turn down the volume with all the yelling. So make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the yelling. So Locked On Sports today brings you the can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube with a free Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we are just simply making the case for why the Pelicans would want to move on from Willie Green. If you are someone who doesn't like Willie Green, wants them to make the change, we're kind of laying it all out there for you to tell your friends, those sorts of things. There's plenty of reasons why. Don't need to make things up with that, right? Like, it's very obvious they can make a change and potentially improve. They could also get worse too, truthfully. Now, the Pelicans aren't going to make a move. They gave Willie Green the contract extension. I think there's a lot of belief in him. And look, there's a lot of reasons why they should believe in him, because it's not all bad when it comes to Willie Green. There are plenty of reasons to not make a change at all, including a big one that you are not thinking about. So we're going to bury the lead for a minute, right? The first one here, 49 wins. 49 wins. Almost 50. It's a lot. This team has improved every single season that Willie Green has been the head coach. First year, 36-46, 10 games under, five games really there, under 500, but made the playoffs and took the Phoenix Suns to 6 games, won the play-in tournament. In 2022, 2023, they had a winning record, 42-40. That's pretty good. Lost in the play-in tournament, not great, but still, you improved. Then a 7-win jump this past year to 49-33. That's almost a 60% winning percentage here. They lost Zion Williamson at the end of the season. Got swept in the first round. Would it have been different with Zion? A little bit at least. But you were also the 8th seed going against the 1 seed, and we shouldn't have had high expectations for them to win that series. And by the way, OKC was very underrated. Look at what they just did to the Dallas Mavericks in game 1 of their playoff series. I'm going to watch game 2 tonight. There's an improvement there, and there's something to be said for that, and I think that's a really important thing. The biggest reason, though, has to do with Zion Williamson. Zion Williamson seems to like Willie Green. We've seen him maybe not like other coaches like Stan Van Gundy. How much do you want to rock the boat of Zion Williamson acting like a professional? He's doing all of the things right. He seems to like the head coach. Do you want to mess with that? Do you want to mess with that? Right? The head coach ain't going to matter if Zion's not playing for the most part. We know this, right? It's going to come down to health and stuff like that for the Pelicans here. So if Zion is playing and is excited about playing, there's something to be said for what the head coach is doing. That's a real important thing. This team is centered around Zion with good reason. Don't mess with that if something's working. That would be wild to me, right? Zion is acting like a professional. He's trying hard on defense. He didn't miss back-to-back games this season until the playoffs, right? Everything you want. He's looking like a guy that you can really build your team around for the first time and go forward with a lot of confidence in. That has to do with Willie Green too. It has to do with Willie Green. You can't just completely discount that. Do you want to mess with that, right? The other factor when it comes to Zion too is, we're going to look more at the Phoenix Suns next week and what this means is like a Brandon Ingram trade partner and all of those things, right? The future of Kevin Durant, Devin Booker. But Booker's now going to have 7 coaches in 10 seasons with the Phoenix Suns. That's what they are on pace to do when they hire this new head coach for them. 7 coaches in 10 seasons. Is that what you want? Like, is that a good thing? Is that a good thing when you have a guy that's winning games? Right now, if you were to fire Willie Green and bring in a new head coach, you're giving Zion Williamson 4 head coaches in 6 years. 4 head coaches in 6 years. You're getting towards that 7 and 10 number if that's the case. That's not a good thing, right? That's not a good thing at all. And we've talked about how coaches can grow and change too, and they need to. But even when you look at one of Willie Green's faults here of not playing some of the young guys, Trey Murphy, his rookie year being an example, they almost lost that play-in tournament game to the Clippers because of Tony Snell minutes. Who knows how last season would have gone if you didn't just yank Trey Murphy for 3 games and put in Josh Richardson as the starter, right? That wasn't a great move. Lack of minutes for Jordan Hawkins, meaning you can't bring him off the bench. You can't use him in the playoffs because he's ice cold and hasn't played and hasn't had time to develop some of the skills that you need in the postseason. Good defensive habits, things like that are going to get built by playing. Trey Murphy's a real good player, in line for a lot of money now. Was that maybe the right move to bring him along slowly his rookie year? Right? There's something to be said for that. When you look long-term with it, if it's actually working out, there's something to be said for that. You know, it's a little TBD on some other things. Some of the other guys haven't really developed, right? Dyson is looking okay. You know, Kyra didn't develop at all. You know, it's TBD on Jordan Hawkins and that sort of thing. But at least there's a bit of a track record with Trey Murphy for that. So is that truly a bad thing? Especially when you weren't going to win in the playoffs anyway. Maybe, maybe not. That's TBD. One of the things, though, being a small market and needing to develop through the draft, because you're not going to get guys in free agency, is you need to develop those players. You need to develop those players. And look at a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers and some of the players they have, some of the young guys, Mobley as an example. Same guy was like a year ago, right? Show me the growth there from him other than just like incrementally better, but what's really changed? And you can't really point to much. That's not great. You need to develop guys like that. We don't know whether Willie Green can truly do that or not yet because we just, fully haven't had enough time. Though Herb Jones is maybe an example of his offense getting significantly better under this head coach. There's something to be said for all of those things as to why to maybe not move on from Willie Green or why Willie Green isn't one of the worst head coaches in the league. Something to consider. But the opportunity cost part, I think, is very real. The Lakers are going to hire, in theory, a good head coach. Same thing for the Phoenix Suns, who are targeting Mike Budenholzer right now, championship-winning head coach. Charles Lee has long been thought as an up-and-coming, good, young head coach. The Charlotte Hornets just nabbed him. If this isn't your guy going forward, rip the Band-Aid off, right? Like, this is the person you're not going to marry. You don't need to be dating him at this point in time. So there's your case for why they should maybe move on from head coach Willie Green, but also why they shouldn't as well. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Are you swayed either way by this? What do you think Willie Green's biggest fault is? What do you think the biggest plus for him is? His biggest strength? Let me know. And that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. This week of Locked On Pelicans, we got a lot to talk about. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you all so much for listening. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. And I'll be back with y'all on Monday for another show. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.